now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's EPAY webinar in regards to learning and reviewing our manual timesheet process. My name is Tiandra Raber, and I am part of the EPAY support team. Our team does consist of Christian Contreras, Jade Leal, and Beth Briones. So we are here to support your everyday EPAY needs. Just a reminder that during our webinars, we do have all of the attendees currently muted. So if you do have any questions, please be sure and address your questions in the question area there on the webinar control panel. And I will be addressing those during the appropriate time during our webinars. I will be reviewing and checking those questions. So at any time you have a question, please be sure and post it there. So what are we going to cover today? Today, I'm going to just go ahead and go over a quick review of the Blueforce payroll process. We're going to quickly discuss payroll readiness, and then we will go into handling the payroll adjustments. Many of you are new to Blueforce, so this will be hopefully some helpful insight in regards to some things you may learn and making sure your payroll is correct prior to getting it exported to JDE for processing. So again, like when we sent out our emails, are you producing error-free payrolls? Is your team consistently getting paid correctly and on time? These are questions that we address in all of our webinars, and we hope that you also make these some key factors when you are in Blueforce reviewing your payrolls. So the Blueforce payroll process, just a quick overview. So it always begins with making sure that your employees are punching in and punching out on one of the approved time card collection methods, whether it's using the Walter time clock, the phone-in system, the mobile punch, or the web punch. Your supervisors or managers, usually they're either an editor or a submitter role, will review employee punches daily. We do stress and we do make it kind of our required method is to go ahead and review your punches daily. This does help cut down on errors. Then it rolls to your manager, usually a submitter as well, will review the time for the pay week and submit that time for your pay week. We ask that you go ahead and review each week and get those submitted weekly so that you can tidy up your payrolls depending on if you're a weekly or a bi-weekly payroll. You can get your pay weeks in, submitted, and all corrections rolled up so that it moves on to the next level, which is your approver, which is usually maybe somebody in an admin position at the office or a different manager. We do have the segregation of roles set up so that not one single person has access to do the submitting and the approving process. So the approver will give the timesheets and time another quick review and then approve. Now we do stress that make sure that before submitting and before approving that you have reviewed and checked to make sure that time is correct. We do call the approving sort of as the point of no return because it is a little bit more difficult if there are issues that you need to have corrected. Once you hit approve, then you no longer have the ability to reopen those timesheets, and you do have to reach out to support the EPAY support team to get those timesheets opened. So once the approving process happens, then that's when the corporate payroll takes over by exporting the time to JDE. This will begin that process of processing your payroll and then funding your payroll. So in regards to the point of no return, as submitter and approvers, make sure that before you finalize your payroll that everything is accounted for. It is your responsibility to make sure your employees are clocking in and clocking out daily, and you are also accountable to make sure that those hours are accurate and correct and everything is getting entered. Once the approvers approve, the export process will begin, and it is very difficult again to retract that. Corporate payroll prepares to export that time, and once that is initiated, the export process does send your payroll to JDE for processing. And it is at that time that any time you missed is now treated as a manual timesheet. So that's why we stress the daily review to make sure that all the time for your employees is being entered correctly. And with the daily reviews, we don't really require, we just ask that it's good practice to make sure that you're reviewing those punches within that 36-hour window. And then also for those of you new on Blueforce, if you have sites where you have Walter clocks and you do have maybe an on-site lead or an on-site supervisor, sometimes it's beneficial to get those employees set up as reviewers, which only gives them access to the clock, to where they can make some quick edits and adjustments there on the clock to save your submitters an extra step in having to make those corrections, because a lot of times your submitters aren't on site and they don't actually know if the employees were there, weren't there, what time the employee, maybe if he came in late, left early, or maybe didn't show up at all. So it's always good to maybe try to have a lead or a supervisor on site with the clocks set up to make some of those edits there on the clock. And then for any of the non-clock sites, punch approvals and corrections made directly into Blueforce, we try to make sure you get those entered in as soon as you know of the time worked. Get those hours entered sooner rather than later, depending on the pay period time, whether you're a weekly payroll or a biweekly payroll. It's usually better to try to get those manually entered hours. When I say manually entered hours, I'm referring to sites maybe that don't have access to clock in, or if it's PTO, sick, vacation, those types of manual entries, to go ahead and get those entered in sooner rather than later, so that you're not trying to scramble at the end of your pay period to enter in those PTO type hours. So just going back, if daily reviews are occurring, then we really should have no reasons to enter manual timesheets. Our goal is to make sure that you understand and are utilizing Blueforce to the best of its ability so that you do not have to create manual timesheets. Manual timesheets is not really a fun process, and as we go through that later here in the webinar, so it's always beneficial to make sure that you are sending a complete and accurate payroll over to corporate for processing. So payroll readiness, what does that mean? So how would you know if your payroll is ready to go? There are several tools located in Blueforce that just about everyone with a role of an editor above has access to see, and should be utilizing these tools to help prevent your payrolls from being entered inaccurately. The Timesheet View is available to all users. The payroll summary screen and then the payroll register reports, those will step into anyone on the call here that are approvers. But for those of you who are editors and above, the Timesheets is a very valuable tool in regards to making sure that all of your timesheets are submitted and approved, all of your hours are entered correctly on the timesheets. That's a very good tool. There's several different search features that you can utilize within the Timesheet View to make sure that you have everything entered. The payroll summary screen is just for the approvers when you get down to making sure that everyone is ready for your payroll. And I will bring that up and we'll discuss that here a little bit later, and I'll show you how you can easily determine if everyone has been submitted and approved, and to make sure there are no errors by just making sure that we have everybody ready for payroll. And then lastly is the payroll register report. We do encourage you to utilize that and run that report prior to submitting your payroll to corporate for processing. It's got some great information. It tells you, just gives you your total hours for each employee, total paid to each employee, but it also will list there if those employees are ready for payroll, if the employees are active or inactive. And that becomes very valuable if by any chance during your pay period, maybe an employee was terminated. That's going to leave you with an open, not ready person for payroll. And if you run the payroll register report, you'll be able to identify and determine that, hey, we had an employee that got termed a little prematurely before the payroll was run, and then we'll be able to help you get that corrected so that your payroll, so that all employees will be processed with your payroll. So just kind of diving in real quick. So this is the timesheet view, and hopefully everybody on this call is sort of familiar with this view. At the top of the timesheet view, there is a search window that can be utilized in several different ways. You can search on all jobs. You can search by employees. The key one that I'm going to sort of focus on is the timesheet status right there in the center. Obviously, you can set your date range. Usually, you're looking at your pay periods. And then there is also the export details where you can quickly export that in a report if you ever need to do that to send off to anybody for review, or somebody maybe who's not available to log into Blueforce. You can actually email or send the report. And then there's different views where you would just, the export detail will just give you this quick overview of the timesheet view, which just gives you the job and then the total hours either by task or by pay group. Depending on if you are a company with more than one pay groups. So the key here is looking at the far left side where it says status. So as you're reviewing your payrolls, I recommend to all submitters and approvers to go ahead and utilize the timesheet status. On the far right of my screen, I've kind of got what the drop-down arrow shows you. When you click on that timesheet status drop-down, gives you the ability to look at all your timesheets, open timesheets, submitted timesheets, approved timesheets. There's also the needs changes, and that's a key one that we see a lot when people enter in help desk tickets in regards to they can't get their payroll submitted because they've got some open issues. So the needs changes comes up a lot because whenever you have to reject, an approver has to reject a timesheet for any reason for corrections, it is a two-step process. It goes from rejecting it to reopening. And if you don't click that reopening, it leaves that timesheet in a needs changes status. So as we go through a lot of our trainings, we do recommend as submitters and approvers, especially approvers, is to go through and utilize that timesheet status view by quickly displaying, show me anything that's open. And hopefully you don't have any timesheets are open. So if you do click on the status open and you have some timesheets open, then you know that those are not ready. And you need to go back to your district managers or supervisors and just, say, hey, I see these jobs are open. Let me know the status. When are we going to get these submitted? And then next I would roll to the submitted option. And then that's going to show you all the timesheets that are currently in the submitted status. And then you can switch it over to approved, making sure all of your timesheets are now in the approved status. And then, like I said, I always just make sure I let people know to always just briefly go ahead, click on that needs changes just to make sure and double check that you've got nothing that's sort of lingering out there that needs some help. The awaiting export, that's just letting you know that corporate payroll has picked up your payroll and it's in the process of moving from Blueforce to JDE. The status of exported means that that time has left Blueforce and is now in JDE for processing. So when you're looking at your timesheet status selections, anything after awaiting export is when the Blueforce team has a hard time with helping with any of that time. So usually after it's in the awaiting export, that's when, if you've missed any time, that's when you've got to go to the manual timesheets. I don't have any questions yet, so we'll just kind of move along. I'm going to hopefully get to a point in the webinar where I'll actually log into Blueforce, and I'll just go through some of this stuff really quick so you can see it kind of live. So just a quick highlight, the Timesheet Highlight. It's a first step for all of your editors, submitters, and approvers, just making sure that your time is in, your timesheets are submitted and closed up. You can filter this view by either job, employees, or even there is in other filters. Sort your timesheets by status. Again, just making sure you don't have anything open, everything's submitted, or everything's approved. And one thing, I'm going to just flip back to that slide because I did not. So right here, the open punches. So definitely, I know we go over this with all of our webinars. So in order to submit and approve your payroll, you do need to make sure all of your open punches are closed. So the open punch column is very important in regards to making sure that you do not have any open issues on any of your jobs or any of the timesheets for the jobs. Those need to be corrected prior to submitting and approving. In a lot of instances, depending on the type of open punch it is, you will not even be able to submit it. It will actually tell you that there are open issues that need to be addressed. But the rule of thumb is here, make sure that you do not have any open issues when you do click submit or when you do click approve. Let's just make sure those are always clear so that you have a nice, good, clean payroll when it goes time to export to JDE. So I'm going to quickly just bring up the payroll readiness. So the approvers are the ones that have the access to the payroll tab or the payroll module in Blueforce. So any of you on the call that are approvers, this is going to be more focused on yours, just your finalization before submitting it to corporate payroll. There's a lot of things here that you can check, and what you want to make sure that in that very first column where you'll see there on my second line, there's a submit all to the right. So anytime you've got a submit all or even maybe an approve all, that's letting you know that you've got some time in there that has not been submitted. There's still some timesheets open. And you need to make sure that you have all of that rolled up and ready before you submit to corporate payroll. So when you're reviewing the payroll tab, you need to make sure everything's been submitted and approved. That's that first column. The second column is the open punches. You want to make sure you have nothing in red. The pay group name there, they are set up in groups and then a date, and it's group and then it's the date of your pay period. Now, normally, when you open those, most companies will have just the one pay group, but there are several companies that have multiple pay groups, depending on if you've got non-union and union employees. So that's going to be your differentiator. So you can open up that pay group by clicking on that plus sign to expand the grouping, and then that's going to give you the ability to either select a particular pay group, and then as you move over to the far right under status, depending on which pay group you select, you can start to look at the numbers. So the status column for the payroll is always going to start as not ready for payroll. And usually that's during your pay period as your employees are clocking in and clocking out and you are starting to submit and approve. Most of your employees are going to be sitting there in that not ready status. As timesheets get submitted and approved, the employees start rolling down into that next line, which is ready for payroll. And that's the one we want to key in on, is you want to make sure that everyone is ready for payroll. And then there's a number there, which will correspond to the number of employees there that you are paying. So the not ready for payroll is going to have, in this case, I've got one employee not ready. And as I go down and submit and approve, then it should roll down for ready for payroll, one employee. So you want to always make sure that those numbers are rolling down through each process in the payroll process, and that no one is being left behind, because you can quickly see here if there's somebody not ready, it's there in red and there's a number. And as you open up your pay groups, if you click on the different pay groups that you might have access to see, once you click on the pay group, it will start to show you where those employees are sitting. So you can easily look at the not ready employees, or you can look at the ready for payroll employees. And here in a bit, I'll log into Blueforce and I'll kind of go over that, and I'll show you that kind of in a live session. So the next, just the highlights of the payroll, that is what we call the approver's lifeline. So that is where you want to make sure that you've got everybody ready for payroll and there isn't anybody set for not ready. because the person or the employees there in the not ready status, those are the ones that will not get exported, and those are the ones that will not be paid. So you always want to make sure that you don't have anyone in the not ready for payroll status, and then you want to make sure that you do not have anyone sitting there either showing submit all or approve all. So next is the payroll register report. So under the payroll module to the left, under the menu, there is an option there for payroll register report. And we do recommend that you run this for your pay period prior to submitting your payroll to corporate payroll. You can also run this at any time too, because like I said, it's going to show you all those employees who are active, employees who are inactive, employees who are ready for payroll, employees who are not ready for payroll. So when you go into the payroll register report, it's always going to be based off of your job selection in Blueforce. Again, everything is driven in Blueforce off of your job selection. So you'll enter in your date range, and that's always going to mostly, or I shouldn't say mostly, it's always going to be your pay period. So you're going to set your pay period dates, and then down at the bottom, it's going to give you the available pay groups. And like I said, most of you may only see one pay group, but some of you may see multiple pay groups. So you'll have to select each of the pay groups or select all. And then there on the right, you'll select Generate Report. And what that's going to do is bring up a report that's going to provide you the hours and dollars to be paid to each employee, their gross pay, but it's also going to provide you with a current payroll status. So we always want to make sure that they are ready for payroll. Anytime you see someone not ready for payroll, that's going to be a quick identifier that that employee is not going to get paid. Same thing if you're looking at the is the employee active or inactive, and then that export employee status as well. I'm going to pull up a report that I ran this morning because it's a good report. So this is a payroll register from the current pay period that we just paid. I had a user out in the field who had one employee that was not ready for payroll. So I went ahead and just ran the payroll register report. So this is what it looks like, and you can quickly go into your Excel and you can set it to sort and filter. And then all I did was just selected, and I said, show me a no. So then it brought up the one employee who was set to no for not export. Even though he was ready for payroll, this particular employee was not set to export with the rest of the employees. So this was just a very good example that I got today as far as exporting the payroll. Because one thing that we want to note is, I'll go back to the other slide. Goodness, I should just log in. But one thing here with the ready for payroll, there's also an exportable number next to payroll, the ready for payroll, and those numbers should match. In this case that I had this morning, they had 730 employees ready for export or ready for payroll, but only 729 of those were exportable. So you always want to just, when you're rolling through your payroll process, is making sure that as you roll through each one of these steps, that that number stays the same, that it continually matches. So if you start with 730 employees not ready, then you want to make sure you have 730 employees ready for payroll, and that 730 employees are also going to be exported. And then as you go through the rest of the awaiting and the exported, all those should also remain that 730. So that was just a good example that I received this morning in regards to, we had a company that just had one employee that was showing not exportable. So that payroll register report is just a very good tool to have and run, because like I said, it shows you all this information in regards to employee. You can quickly change and look for the status. You can scroll through it, just make sure everybody here, because you always want to make sure your employees say ready for status, the employees are exportable, and then they're active. But this report will also help you if by chance that you have an employee that was maybe termed in the middle of the payroll. They're going to have hours, but they're going to be not ready. They're going to show as not ready for payroll, and then they're going to be in your, is the employee active, yes or no? All right, so we're going to move on. That was the payroll register. And again, we do recommend that you run that as a good tool to just quickly see your total hours. If you are aware of what your employees should be working per week, you'll have a quick glance at that. And then that is also something that you can send out as a review to anyone who may want to review the payroll, your whole total payroll. So just the highlights of the payroll register. It should always be run by the approver prior to approving or prior to letting corporate payroll know that you're ready. We do believe it is a key step, and we do recommend that you do run this report. The status should always show ready for payroll. Not ready is not good. This provides you hours and dollars to be paid. And then the export column should always show yes. The active column should always show yes. And like I said, it is exportable so that you can view it in Excel and sort it. And if you need to email that out for anybody else's review prior to submitting your payroll to corporate, then that's definitely something we recommend as well. So moving on. So how do I handle payroll adjustments? So all adjustments will be handled in Blueforce using the manual timesheet process. So a lot of reasons why we are trying to push some of these webinars, or bringing the webinars back actually, because we've kind of been on hiatus, but we will be doing some more regular webinars in the future along with some other training videos. But with the payroll doing away with the SPR form and now making sure that all manual time or back pay or any of those situations are now all have to be done through Blueforce. So this is just a quick review to make sure we all are up to speed on how to enter that back pay or mispay. So these are going to, the manual timesheet process does include any of the interim check situations, any unpaid hours. These are also handled separately from your regular timesheets. So there is a regular timesheet, or what we call your job timesheets, and then there is a manual timesheets. And the manual timesheet is in a separate area, and it's there purposely because we want to make sure and focus on your job timesheets and making sure those hours are correct and that nothing is mistakenly entered onto a manual timesheet that should not be. You do have the ability to enter up to 2 prior pay periods. We are saying we're going to go back to 2 pay periods. So we're going to use that as best practices because that also affects the reporting. So we can only recommend that you go back 2 pay periods in Blueforce for entering any missed time. Anything greater than this time frame, we would need to get some assistance from the corporate payroll department in regards to how to pay employees that have any time missed from over a month ago. So the biggest mistake that we get is making sure that you submit and approve a timesheet before all other interim situations are compiled. And I'll demonstrate that as we log in. But what that means is a lot of times out in the field, you'll get this employee, employee A is missing 5 hours. So you'll quickly go in, enter that 5 hours on the manual timesheet, submit and approve, and then it comes to find out there's another employee on that same job with maybe a similar situation of missed hours, but now you've already submitted and approved that manual timesheet, so it's now locked for any other future information. So we try to ask that if you can, start gathering all your interim situations, get them kind of in a list before putting them into your manual timesheet and submitting and approving those. We do get and understand that there are some time constraints on certain situations where you have to get a manual timesheet entered for payout to an employee for whatever reason. But for most of the processes, go ahead and just enter them on the manual timesheet. Don't submit and approve until you're for sure that you don't have any other back pay or mispay situations for that job, because the manual timesheets are by job. So once we close it up and by submitting and approving, you've locked that timesheet for any other additions to that manual timesheet. So that's something to keep in mind in regards to the manual timesheet process. That is probably the most frustrating and the one our most requested, or sorry, our most questions come around that in regards to the manual timesheets is I can no longer enter hours because the timesheet's not open. So we do get a lot of questions in regards to that. So how do I handle payroll adjustments? So current pay period, payroll not approved yet. So if there are anything happening within the current pay period that has not yet been approved, then there is no need to create a manual timesheet for any hours that reflect the dates with the open period. So just as an example here, I just have from January 8th or January 2nd to January 8th, the employee has 16 hours of vacation due for the 4th and the 5th. So there's no need to create a manual timesheet for the vacation hours. You would just go to the timesheet, the job site, the job timesheet, the regular timesheet, and enter those vacation hours on that timesheet because you're within that current pay period. So even if maybe that timesheet had been submitted, your approver can reject and reopen it so that you can add those missing vacation hours. So how do I handle payroll adjustments? Prior period, which means payroll has been approved. If any pay period has been approved, then you must create a manual timesheet for any hours that reflect the dates with the closed period. So going back to my example, if the pay period January 2nd through January 8th was closed and the employee had 16 vacation hours due, then yes, you would need to create that manual timesheet. So if the time has been approved, and then a lot of times you can open a help desk ticket with the EPAY team to reopen approved timesheets, but it is a little bit longer process, and you do need to make sure that you give us the time to get those approved timesheets opened. That's why we always stress to be sure that you've got all of your hours in before you submit and approve. We do get that, there are a lot of times where you didn't know a person had taken vacation or sick time and you closed up your timesheet before entering those hours. But try to make sure that you're asking those questions with your field users and leads and supervisors to make sure that they're giving you that information in a timely manner so that you can get those PTO or manually entered time on the timesheets prior to submitting an approver. But definitely once that time has been exported, then you're definitely going to have to create the manual timesheet to get that employee paid those hours. Just a reminder here, do not contact corporate payroll and ask them to key in those missed hours. Everything now needs to go through Blueforce, and payroll is going to be letting you know that, because in regards to them no longer needing or accepting that PTO or SPR form, then everything will need to come through Blueforce. And that's the only way they're going to pick up that time and pay the employees, is if it comes through Blueforce. So just kind of a review, JD security has been adjusted, so no one now has the ability to enter direct time. So that's been restricted. Creating a manual, the time now must be created on a manual timesheet in Blueforce. Again, this is the only way to pay the employees that are due any back or missed pay. And again, we're just stressing, do not contact corporate payroll and ask them to import or key in those missed hours. The only reason we need to contact corporate payroll is in any sort of special circumstance that maybe can't be handled through Blueforce, but almost all situations can be handled by going through Blueforce. Anything past that 2 pay periods mark, then yeah, we'll need to get in discussions with corporate payroll in regards to how to get the hours entered and get the employee paid. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and start talking about how do you create that manual timesheet. The manual timesheet is found underneath the timesheet module. So when you do go into your timesheets, On the left, you do have your menu. The top is your job sheet, timesheets, which is your regular timesheets, which is what normally comes up when you click on your timesheet view, is what we call your regular timesheets or the current job timesheets. The bottom selection of that menu is going to be your manual timesheet. So that is where you would click to go in and enter your manual timesheet. So once you click on manual timesheet, you'll have to enter in some search criteria. It's good to go ahead and select the job, even if you have multiple jobs selected or even the one job selected. You do need to go in and tell the manual timesheet, you'll need to let it know this is a job that I want to work with. You're going to need to set your date range. And usually if you put it with that current week or that current pay week for the dates missing, you'll enter the from and to dates so that you can get the correct timesheet to come up. You must always enter the show blank timesheets. And the reason for this is because the manual timesheets, there isn't anybody or any employee with hours on the timesheets, so they're blank. So you do have to make sure you click that show blank timesheets so that you can begin to enter the hours on the timesheet. Once you have hours entered on the timesheet, then you won't have to click the show blank timesheet. You'll just be able to save it, and if you need to come back to the timesheet, you'll be able to see it without clicking the show blank. So again, remember to always click the show blank timesheet. I know in my picture here, it looks like it's a big checkbox. It's not. It's a little tiny checkbox next to the date. So make sure you click show blank timesheets and then click search. And what that's going to do is provide you with any available timesheets for that date range combination. So the reason why you may see one or more timesheets is going to be either your dates are overlapping or you've got access or that job has multiple pay groups. So maybe the job both has union and non-union employees, then you're going to be presented with the pay group of either a non-union or a union. The non-union pay groups always begin with with the letter N, and the union pay groups are always going to begin with the letter U. So you'll need to always make sure that you're selecting the correct timesheet. So if it's a union employee, you always want to make sure you're picking that job with the union pay group, and then you'll open that timesheet and begin to enter in the information. If it's a non-union, then just be sure you're selecting the job and then the corresponding pay group of non-union with that pay period, and you'll open that timesheet and begin to enter in the missing hours. So I think at this time, I will go ahead and just log into Blueforce, and we'll kind of just step through the manual process. So that way we can all see a clear picture of how the process is entered. So we'll go through it. Like I said, it's not the best process, but it is the process we have in place. So just going back to the beginning of making sure that you are submitting and approving accurate payrolls, then you won't have to go in and worry about entering a manual timesheet. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is just select some of my jobs. And again, just from the home screen, if you don't already have your jobs coming up automatically, some of you do, some of you don't, depending on how much you have access to see. So once I have my job selection, I'm going to just go over to Timesheets. And then here on the left, you see my menu. And I'm going to just go ahead and go into Manual Timesheets. Blueforce always just starts you on the current date. So since I have several jobs selected, I'm going to go ahead and tell it that I need to go ahead and look at my main office. I'm not going to worry about employee. You can select employee now if you'd like as well, but when you open up the manual timesheet, it's going to prompt you for that information again. So we'll just go ahead and back up to November 4th through the 10th, and I'm going to click Show Blank Timesheets, and then I'm going to click Search. So lucky for me, I only have one timesheet that comes up. probably because it's based off of all employees. Let's go search at all employees. So there, so now I'm looking at all employees, then it's going to give me several different pay groups. So if you want to, dwindle it down to limit your choices, you can go ahead and search on a particular employee. But just depending on if you've got a mix of employees, you may or may not get one, you may get two. So like this particular employee has access to both, but my dates are overlapping. Just the pay period here is showing you that my 4th through the 10th is actually going to fall into 2 different pay periods. So you just want to make sure that you select the manual timesheet that corresponds with the work dates that you're entering. So if I'm entering anything between the 29th and the 4th, I would open this one. If I'm entering dates between the 11th, the 5th and the 11th. And if you are entering, you could possibly have the scenario where you might have to enter one day on this particular timesheet because it falls in that pay period, and then the rest of the time into a second timesheet for that employee. So it's always going to be geared off of the work date. So once you determine which timesheet is the best or the one that you need, you're going to open that up and you're going to click Add New. And what that's going to do is bring up the options for you to begin to enter in that missed time. So again, keep in mind the pay period is the 29th through the 4th. So my work date has to fall within this pay period. If you try to enter in a work date that does not fall into this pay period and you click Save, you're going to get a purple error message. So always whenever you're entering these in and you click Save, you're going to get an error message or you're going to get a success message. So always just key in on either if it's successful, yay, then you can move on. But if it's not, read what it says because it usually will give you a clue into what the issue is. And if you still have issues and you can't get past it, then go ahead and open up a help desk ticket with the EPAY support team and we'll help you get through it. So looking at pay period the 29th through the 4th, I'm going to just go ahead and say on Monday the 30th, my employee Edward, who's a custodian, if I need to include a work order for these missed hours, you definitely can do that. The past pay date column, this column is tricky and it does trip up a lot of people. What we recommend is to always just start with the first day of the pay period. So this one is going to be the 28th, Saturday the 28th, because our pay periods run Saturday to Friday, and it's also prior to the 30th. So if I tried to enter a past pay date that was after my work date and tried to save it, it's going to give me an error. So we always recommend that you go ahead and just the past pay date, just make it a habit of starting with the first day of the pay period, whichever that Saturday is, because what's going to happen is the manual timesheet also does what the regular timesheets is you cannot enter more than 23 hours in a day for an employee. So if you owe the employee 40 hours of vacation time, you can't just say 40 hours on one line. EPAY is going to make you break that out. So moving on. So again, past pay date, our recommendation is just start with that first Saturday of the pay period. Rate type, regular, vacation, whatever it is that you're entering in for the employee, whatever the missed time is, go ahead and code it to the correct rate type. For this example, I'm just going to go ahead and stick with regular. And then the hours, however many hours you're owed for that day, and I'm just going to say he normally works 6 hours. Rate, you can leave blank unless they're getting paid at a special rate. Unless this particular job at this particular employee gets paid at a different rate, or maybe there was a shift differential. Keep in mind that the manual timesheet is very simplistic and does not do the same calculations as the regular timesheets. So if the employee gets a shift differential or any type of up rate, you need to make sure you have that calculated and you can enter it there on the rate. If you leave it blank, if it's just a regular rate, you can leave it blank and it'll just pick up the rate the employee is paid. So once you key in what the rate type is, however many hours is owed to the employee, down here at the very far right, you can enter in a comment and you can just say missed pay, no time entered, whatever it is, that just something for you to key in on why you're entering this manual timesheet. And then once you have all of your fields entered, you would just swing all the way back over to the left and you're going to click Save. And what you're looking for is your manual timesheet entry added successfully. So now I have, for my employee Edward, I have 6 hours. It automatically filled in the rate of $10 an hour. So he's going to get paid 60, and then total pay and all that. So now you can see you've got one line of time entered for Edward. And let's say if we need to add, he missed 2 days. So the next line, I'm going to go ahead and enter in on the 31st. He was also a custodian. The past pay date, where you run into trouble with the past pay date is if I needed to give Edward more than 23 hours, I won't be able to use the same past pay date. Because if you notice here, the work date is changing, but the past pay date isn't. And the past pay date is also going to calculate the 23 hours in a day. And I know that's kind of confusing, but we have to keep in mind that this is just how Blueforce works. We cannot pay the employee more than 23 hours. Yes, his work dates are different, but the past pay date is also going to be playing in this setup. So that's why we recommend that you start with the first Saturday of the pay date, because now from here you can just roll to the 29th. So what I recommend and what we teach is you start with the first Saturday, depending on how many lines, especially if you're entering multiple lines for an employee. It's always best to start on the Saturday. So as you're going through, you're going to enter in the new work date, and then you're going to enter in the new past pay date. And that way you're never going to conflict or have that error pop up in regards to more than 23 hours in a day. So I'll back it up to the 28th, and let's see if I can pay Edward. I'm going to try to pay him 18 hours. And I'm going to save it. So this is just an example. It's going to say total hours across all sites for an employee cannot be more equal to 24 hours. So yes, the work dates are 2 different work dates, but the past pay date is also playing in this whole calculation. So now I'm trying to actually pay the employee 24 hours in regards to this date. And I know it's cumbersome and confusing, but this is just how it works. So they both play on each other. So I couldn't enter in 24 hours on one single line for an employee, and I can't use the past pay date either. So that's why if we recommend you start on the Saturday, so each day that you enter the work date and the past pay date, you're just moving dates. So then you're never going to come across this conflict with the 23 hours in a day. So now I should be able to save this line, and I can, because I've moved my past pay date to the very next date as well. So now I've got 18 hours on one day, 6 hours on the other. So now I've got this particular timesheet for this employee of 24 hours of missed pay is what we're going to end up paying this employee. And I can continue adding lines for this employee, or I might need to add on this particular job. So remember, I'm working with just the one My Main Office. And if it's a new employee, you can just go back to the 30th. And I'm going to so this is a good example. I'm just working with the employee up here in the search screen. So we'll cancel that. And we're going to change. So a lot of times, if you have all employees selected, that's when you would be able to, I apologize if you guys hear all the background noise. If you have all the employees, when you go to add a new line, then you will have all the employees here if you needed to just select which employee you're adding time for. So there's several different ways you can do the timesheet by employee. Or if you've got multiple employees, you can leave it all employees, or you can switch between the first employee and then the next employee in regards to search and setting up the timesheet. So if I went up here and went ahead and said employee Christian Contreras. I'm going to go ahead. So now what's going to happen is you no longer see Edward, because now you're just looking at a manual timesheet for Christian. So if you want to keep your view to see all of the lines of time that you're entering for that job, which is my main office, then you would leave your search as all employees, because that's going to continue to show you everything that you're entering for all the employees. So we're going to say on the 30th, that Christian also worked as a custodian. And since I'm using a new employee, I can still go back now to my past pay date beginning on that Saturday. And we can just say we owe him holiday worked OT. And again, these rate types work exactly the way they work on the regular timesheet. So I've now selected holiday worked OT, which is going to pay Christian time and a half for any hours that I enter. So I can just say 8. I'm going to just skip the rate, and I'm just going to put holiday missed or whatever comment you want to key in on for why. So now if I come over here, I'll save the line. So now you'll be able to view, because my search is on all employees for this job, for this pay period, all of the timesheets or manual entry that I've had to do for any employee on this job. So as you're moving through this is where we want to just go back to making sure your employees are clocking in and clocking out, and making sure that any missed time or PTO time is reported early in your pay periods so that we can avoid the manual timesheet process. So our goal here is to get you to utilizing the manual timesheet very minimally. So that's our goal. So that's what we strive to do, is make sure that you're not having to enter the manual timesheets. So just to reiterate, what I'm showing you is I'm only working with this one particular job. I have my pay period selected. It's within this pay group. I'm looking at all employees because this is going to show me all of my entries. If I were to select just one particular employee, then that's going to just show me only the time that I have entered for Christian. If I go and look at any of the time I entered for Edward, then it's going to show me only that time entered for Edward. But then I can also change it to say, okay, show me all of the manual time that I've entered for all employees for this particular job. So now if you're finished and you've entered in all of the manual time that you know of for my 100 my main office, here's the submit button. So the manual timesheets follow the same rule as the regular timesheets. They must be submitted and they must be approved in order for corporate payroll to pick them up. So I can click submit. Oops, I have to select my timesheets. So you would select your lines of time and click submit. Many of you may see this record updates successfully, but could not find any recipient for notification. Anytime you see this message, could not find any recipient for notification, all that's letting you know is there was not an email generated to the person who's your approver. And a lot of times your approvers do not have the email notification turned on because they are approving multiple job sites, and they're going to get an email every single time that anything happens with that timesheet for that job. So if you have an approver over 100 jobs, then more than likely they have that notification turned off. So that's all that means, is that that email is not being sent to that approver. There are some approvers that get the email notification, and you'll have that approver's name. It'll say notification sent to that person. So don't freak out if you ever see or if you do see this and you've always wondered why or what that meant. That's just saying that there just was not an email notification sent to that. So I'm going to go back. So now, if I wanted to review any of my manual timesheets for that pay period, I need to go back to October because it was during, I no longer have to use the show blank timesheet because I do have time on it. So now it's going to give me, if I go change my date range and my searching here, now it's going to show, just like the regular job site is, submitted status. So this particular manual timesheet that I've entered is submitted. It's not approved, it's only submitted. So you just need to make sure that your approver goes in to the manual timesheet. So they also have to go into the manual timesheet view, or the approver, if they know that there's some manual time out there, as an approver, if you're an approver on this call, you can also do the same thing from the payroll tab. You have the manual payroll summary, which will, if you select your dates and search, you'll be able to go out and view any of the manual time that might be exporting with your payroll, or you can go to just the payroll tab and review any manual time that you're going to be sending over for payroll to export. And then here under select action, you can approve it or you can reject it. So it's a similar situation as rejecting and reopening the regular timesheets, the approvers. If you submit the time and you get another employee who's saying that they're missing some hours, you can just have your approver reject it. So they can click reject, and then it's a two-step. Well, I can't do it with this particular profile that I'm logged into because it's only a submitter. But they would then get to needs changes, and they would have to go into they would first reject it, and then they would have to go to reopen, and then this number 3 would flip over here to the open status, and then you'll be able to go back in and add any additional time to that manual timesheet and then resubmit it, and then the approver can approve all. So when you're approving all, it's saying there's 3 here, and if the approver wants to review what's been added, they can click on this, anything that's highlighted, the number 3, and they can quickly get an overview of what was submitted as far as manual time or missed time. So just a quick review from the payroll tab, manual payroll summary. This is going to be for your approvers. You can back your date up because you'll have to make sure you're looking at that past pay period. Search, and then it's going to show you the manual timesheet that's out there. And then this, under the submitted, you can just quickly open it and get a quick review of what's been entered or what's been missed. If you don't have any questions, you can approve it from here, or you can go back and approve it from the action here. I'm going to see what questions we might have if there's something I need to go over again. Okay, so one of the questions was, what if the work date to be entered is the first date of the pay period? What date would you use for the past pay date? So in that instance, you can start on that Saturday. We'll flip back over to timesheet and the manual timesheet. And I'm going to go ahead and we'll just pick a different job. I'll look at all employees. We're going to do show blank. So adding a new line of time. So if the work date just happens to be, let's see, I'm looking at the 29th. So he happened to actually work on that Saturday. Oh, well, this is a test pay group, so this one's not going to, my dates aren't going to fall. So this one's saying that the beginning is a Sunday, so we're just going to just go with that. Sorry, guys. So this test pay group, the pay periods are Sundays, which is not correct. So, but we'll use it as an example. So the first day is the employee worked was on that first day of the pay period. Well, just Christian Contreras is my only employee. He's a custodian. And then I can still just begin my past pay date. We'll just do regular 8, and I'll save it. Oh, and this is the one that we get a lot, is past pay date should be less than work date. So the past pay date, in this case, yeah, so it has to go. So the past pay date, the pay period has to be before the work date. Yeah. So if they worked on the first day of the pay period, then the past pay date does have to actually be a date that falls before that that work date. So in this case, yes, this past pay date, the pay period is going to change slightly, but the actual full pay period, because the work date falls into this pay period. So you're going to be okay. So that's something to key in on. I apologize for that because I got a little turned around with my pay group starting on Sunday. So again, just to go over that, the work date can be the first day of the pay period, which is that Saturday, and then the past pay date, just make it that Friday before so that they're not conflicting, because you're going to get that message that says that the past pay date needs to be less than the work date. So the past pay date is always going to be the column and the date that kind of trips up everybody. But we just recommend that you just, if you can, start with that beginning Saturday and just work your way forward. But if they actually have time on that first day of the pay period, then just make it that day before. So now if I did the 30th, I should be able, Christian, custodian, the 29th, we'll make him regular, 8, and we'll save it. Yeah. So even though that past pay date, the pay period does display the previous pay period, it's still going to be driven off of your work date and then the current pay period that you're working with. So the work date and the past pay date can't be the same date. So the dates do sort of have to change. And the reason why we ask you to just move forward with the past pay date is so that you don't get caught up in that 24-hour error where you're trying to enter more than 23 hours or more than 24 hours for an employee. Even though your work dates change, the past pay date also has that same rule in regards to the 24-hour rule. So once you get them submitted, again, make sure that you are getting all of your entries in before you submit. So with the removal of the SPR form, it's going to be recommended that you do have the ability to do lump sum hours and lump sum pay, or not lump sum hours, but just other pay. So if you're needing to pay somebody out 40 hours of vacation, it's going to be recommended that you're going to have to key in those lines of vacation instead of doing the lump sum other pay, only because it's easier for us to track, and then same thing on the payroll side. They'll be able to know the exact dates that that's being paid for. So you want to make sure that you're utilizing the correct dates at all possible for the hours that you're entering on the manual timesheet. It's actually very important now because without that SPR form, we need to have the data in Blueforce to be as accurate as it can be, so that if there is any question from the employee in regards to, I didn't get paid for this date, then we can definitely go back and see that, yes, manual time was entered in for this particular work date. Because if we do just a lump sum payment of, hey, we just paid this employee 40 hours worth of time, we're not going to be able to have anything to back if that employee was actually paid on the correct dates. So we are recommending, and we are moving forward with not utilizing that other pay column. It's there, but again, like I said, if we ever have questions or an employee questions that they didn't get paid, so do use the work date. It does get a little cumbersome because if you're entering in 40 hours for an employee, then yeah, it's going to be 5 lines of 8 hours. So, but as you see, once you start getting in here and just kind of rock and rolling through it, work date and filling in all the dates, it does go by kind of quickly. So it's not too terrible. Once you get familiar with it, it's not too bad, but it is a little more cumbersome than the regular timesheet. So that's where we always go back and reiterate, making sure your employees are clocking in, clocking out, making sure any of the manual time in regards to like PTO time is entered in sooner rather than later. So it's always a good idea to make sure that your supervisors and your leads are letting you know if a person calls out, a person takes vacation, a person leaves early, so that you're able to make those adjustments during the current pay period and try to avoid the manual timesheet entry. So I was just looking to see if we had any other questions. I'm hoping I covered everything. So we are going to have, I hope I covered everything to make this process a little clearer for everybody. So I'm going to just go back to the beginning just to kind of go over some points in regards to the timesheets. So again, your manual timesheet, there's going to be several things that you've got to look at is what job. So you're going to always have to tell Blueforce, especially when you're in the manual timesheet, what timesheet are you wanting to look at. So you would make sure and tell it, this is the manual timesheet I'm working with. You can specifically search for an employee if you want to minimize how many pay groups you might have to select from. And then set your date range. And then you're always going to have to say show blank timesheet. So again, just remember, the manual timesheets do not have time on them. So that's why you always have to show the blank timesheet so that you'll get that manual timesheet presented to you to where you can begin to enter in the hours. So even with this particular search here, you can see that I do have one particular manual timesheet for Whataburger here that has 16 hours. So it's in open status. So in this case, for this particular job, for this pay period, I could go in and add more time if I needed to. If that was in submitted status, then I would not be able to add any additional time to that timesheet. That's why we ask that you try to kind of get a list or kind of compile all of the missed pay as best you can, and get it all entered in at the same time and submitted and approved at the same time, because once we close up, or once you close up and submit and approve that timesheet, it's now locked and it's all driven off of the job and the pay period. So unfortunately, this is just how this is set up, that now that job for that pay period is now locked and you cannot add any further time. If it's just in submitted status, then you can get your approver to reopen it and you can add additional time. But if that timesheet actually gets submitted, approved, exported, now that job and that pay period is now closed. So that's the biggest hurdle and that's the biggest issue we always face with the manual timesheets. I know it's not always doable in the field side to get all that information up front, but I do know with the manual or with the SPR process and payroll, I'm not 100% sure, but I am thinking that they're not processing those every day. So if they're not processing those special pay requests every day, and unless it's a special circumstance anyways, then my recommendation is if they're processing special pay requests on Wednesday, then you've got Monday, Tuesday to get all that information in and then get it submitted and approved and submitted to payroll. So the biggest thing that I do have to also let you know is if you have a manual timesheet out there and it's submitted and approved, you must also email corporate payroll in regards to letting them know you have a manual timesheet out there. Even if you have a manual timesheet that you're pushing through with maybe your regular processing, you must tell them that you have a manual timesheet that also needs to be picked up. Because in the payroll tab, which is the same tab that that payroll also utilizes for exporting payroll, those notifications are not right there. So from the payroll tab, they're only seeing the current pay period, they actually have to go over and go look and pick up that manual timesheet. So if you don't notify them that there's a manual timesheet that also needs to be exported and processed and paid, they're not going to know to go look for that, because it's not just viewable on the payroll screen for them to export. So manual timesheets, regular timesheets, both need to be submitted and approved. Manual timesheets, you do need to make sure that you're submitting that information to corporate payroll for processing, and then along with your normal payroll processing. So when you're submitting your manual payroll or manual timesheets to corporate, I know they do also ask that you have a screenshot. So when you're in your manual payroll summary, you should be able to screenshot this particular screen, image and send to them so that they know that it's approved. So basically what they're looking for is making sure that it's in the approved status, because if they've got to go look and retrieve your manual timesheet and it's not approved, then they've got to go back and email you and say, hey, this isn't approved. So it saves some time on both sides. As long as you make sure that everything's approved, then payroll can quickly go in and pick that up. So that's why they ask for the screenshots, because the screenshot just lets them know that, hey, this is approved, and they can move forward with picking it up. So again, it's just on the payroll tab. Again, this is for all the approvers here on the call, that the payroll summary, you can take a screenshot of this particular window so that they know here's the pay period, and it will show approved. So from here, I can say approve all. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot. I'm a submitter. I can't approve them. My test account's a submitter only. So looking for those of you who are approvers or submitters on the call, you can see where the roles in Blueforce do play a part in not being able to approve if you're not set up to approve. You can try, but it won't let you. So that's why we have the differentiation in between the roles. It's more of the SOX compliance. You can't have somebody doing both roles. All right, so we're going to go back to payroll. One other thing that I'm going to just kind of explain. So one of the other things that corporate payroll asks that you do in regards to when you're submitting sending your payroll over to corporate payroll for processing is a summary. So you can always click on show summary, and basically what that's going to tell you and tell corporate payroll is your total hours, because they need to make sure that they're exporting the correct amount of hours from Blueforce into JDE and that those numbers match. So it is important that you do give them this show summary. You can click on show summary here and give them that screenshot so that they have the totals that are correct. And all that's going to do here is just list out the different rate types that you've used, the total hours, and then total amount. So they match that. So when the time leaves Blueforce and goes to JDE, they match that. So a lot of times you may have a payroll processor go back to you and say, the hours aren't matching, or what I exported and what you sent aren't matching. So they'll usually send that, let you know that they're not matching, and then if you can't determine where the miscommunication is, then you can open a ticket with the EPAY team, and we'll definitely help you out and work through that to make sure that corporate payroll has the correct payroll amounts for your processing. I'm going to see, I think I have another question. So this particular person said, okay, so this question is, I have a person that earns more money at one site than they do at other sites. So there are things, so what we do recommend in Blueforce is, if you've got the shift differentials, you have situations where an employee goes and works another site and gets paid at a different rate, we can get all that set up in Blueforce for you. Same thing with the holidays. So I know we're coming into the end of the year, but beginning in January, we can get the standard holidays set up for you to where when an employee clocks in, they automatically get paid at whatever the holiday pay that they should be. And again, Blueforce is all driven around worked hours. So this is for those employees that clock in, so that you don't have to go back in and change those hours from regular to a holiday. I'm also going to briefly mention the PTO hours. As we start going into the new year, you will probably start seeing an email in regards to, do you want us to input those PTO balances for 2018? So what that's going to do is start loading those balances into Blueforce so you have visibility into what an employee has used or not used in regards to PTO. So I'm just touching on that briefly. That's not anything we're talking about in this call today, but just kind of putting that out there just to look for those emails in regards to getting that set up going forward. So go ahead and enter in a help desk ticket so that we can help you get that set up to where if you have an employee who makes a different amount when they go to a different job site, we can go definitely get that set up for you in Blueforce. Go ahead and just get a help desk ticket sent over, and the team will gladly get that set up for you. So I think we are just about out of time, and I do appreciate you guys logging in and joining us today. We are going to have this same manual timesheet webinar on Thursday. So if you would like to join it again, feel free. If you have some other employees or anybody else you feel should probably also get familiar with the manual timesheet process, have them go ahead and sign up for the webinar on Thursday. This is just a quick reminder. Remember, once you do a manual timesheet, get it submitted and approved, be sure and contact corporate payroll and let them know that there's a manual timesheet there to be picked up. And of course, just making sure that if we're doing our daily reviews, then we should have no reason to do manual timesheets. So we utilize Blueforce functionality to help with shift differentials, holiday exceptions, to prevent from having to track info manually. So just to reiterate, we are trying to make sure you utilize the manual timesheets very minimally. So review your timesheets, review your time cards, and everything should be good when it comes to payroll time. And then last but not least is, how do I get EPAY support? So some of you may have noticed that our corporate help desk here has changed a bit. So you can still create your own help desk ticket by going to the link there. But we do also now have live assistance Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. You can call the help desk number there. You can pick EPAY option. I'm not sure what option number it is, but there is an option there when you dial in for EPAY. And what that's going to do is it's going to ring straight to the EPAY team. So at any time you need help, you can call us and you will get help from the team. If we are all on a call or we are all busy, just know that that call will then roll to the NSC, which is our National Service Center. So they will enter the ticket for you. But you do now have the ability to call in and actually talk to somebody. So I do encourage you guys to utilize that function. Give us a call. We're all here every day, glad to assist. And then also, if you do have after-hour support, because anytime after 5, if you call, the NSC will pick it up. But we do recommend that after-hour support is go ahead and contact EPAY support directly. They're 24/7, especially if you have Walter clocks, because a lot of times the Walter issues are at night. This will get you some support quickly in the evenings when we're not available. So that is how you get in contact with the EPAY team. And again, thank you so much for spending this afternoon with me. And we look forward to you joining us on Thursday. I do believe Beth is going to lead that discussion on Thursday. So she may have some other tips and tricks to add. If you'd like to join her on Thursday, that would be great. We'd love to have you. Keep an eye out on your emails in regards to other trainings and any other information. We do have lots of changes coming down between now and January. So some exciting stuff. Thanks again and have a great day.